My name is Aita. I've been married to Anthony for almost 3 years now. We both enjoy our current jobs, and although we hope to have children someday, we are currently focused on our careers. Since we got married, Anthony has been helping with the house chores, although it's not a strict 50-50 division. He cooks dinner for me when I have to work late, and on his days off, he will do the dishes if I ask him to. I wasn't particularly bad at housework myself, so I thought our marital relationship was just fine with this arrangement. However, lately, I've been feeling a bit dissatisfied. It's because Anthony has been going to his parents' house very often. We used to visit his parents together occasionally, but recently, he's been staying there after work or going alone on his day off. I believe it all started when his father passed away about 6 months ago, leaving his mother alone. Anthony's brother, concerned about their mother, moved in with his family, but it seems that the cohabitation isn't going very smoothly. At first, I couldn't help but feel immense respect for my brother-in-law and sister-in-law who decided to live together out of concern for my mother-in-law. It was evident to everyone that my mother-in-law was deeply saddened, and we all hoped that this arrangement would bring some cheer back into her life. In the early days after my father-in-law's passing, when my brother-in-law and his wife has just started living with her, I would occasionally visit and support my mother-in-law. Gradually, she started regaining her usual brightness and life began to return to normal. During the time when everyone around us felt relieved, the atmosphere began to change. It seemed that my mother-in-law couldn't shake off her tendency to be overly involved, perhaps because she had taken care of my father-in-law's needs for so long. My brother-in-law and his wife have a daughter, and my mother-in-law tried to take charge of everything related to her as if she were replacing my father-in-law. While my brother-in-law and his wife didn't have any particular preferences when it came to childcare, my mother-in-law's approach was quite forceful. She would scold and become angry if her grandchild didn't finish the meal she served, and she would confine the child to her room if she didn't comply with her instructions. "Mother, please stop. This is discipline. If she doesn't behave properly, she won't grow up to be a decent adult." Even when my sister-in-law tried to intervene, my mother-in-law refused to listen. When I first heard about it, I was truly surprised. Was it normal for someone to go to such extremes in the name of discipline? However, as I believed, it wasn't my place to interfere since I didn't live with them. All I could do was listen to my sister-in-law's tale of hardship. One day, my sister-in-law couldn't take it anymore and made a proposal to my mother-in-law. "I'll take care of our family, including our daughter, so please focus on yourself." My sister-in-law had never been fond of excessive interference. It must have taken a lot of courage for her to make this suggestion. With my brother-in-law's support, my mother-in-law reluctantly agreed to it on the spot. However, our family home was not a complete two-generation household. There were shared spaces that couldn't be completely separated, making it difficult to divide household chores entirely. As I expected, my mother-in-law started interfering in my brother-in-law and sister-in-law's household chores again. She would enter their room without permission and start doing housework, or even discard my brother-in-law and sister-in-law's daughter's favorite clothes just because they were old. To make matters worse, She would casually wash and ruin my sister-in-law's nice clothes. My sister-in-law must have felt an urge to express her anger. However, she held back and indirectly told her, "Stop, please." But my mother-in-law responded, "I feel better when I'm doing something." She completely ignored my sister-in-law's feeling. Since then, my mother-in-law had been doing as she pleased. Despite my sister-in-law already planning the meals, my mother-in-law would buy boxed lunches for everyone without permission, simply because she wanted to eat them. I also heard that recently she had started buying clothes for my brother-in-law and sister-in-law's daughter without their consent. However, the clothes my mother-in-law bought were always discounted items that were no longer in fashion. Their daughter, who had just turned 5 and was developing her own preferences, showed no interest in wearing the clothes my mother-in-law bought. Initially, my brother-in-law and sister-in-law deliberately avoided addressing the issue. "I bought those clothes for her, so why isn't she wearing them?" "Well, haha. Come on, dress her up quickly." Reluctantly, my sister-in-law tried to dress her daughter in the clothes my mother-in-law bought, but her daughter stubbornly refuses. Frustrated, my mother-in-law sulks and directs snide remarks at my sister-in-law. Caught in such a dilemma, my sister-in-law seemed to accumulating a significant amount of stress. All I could do was listen to my sister-in-law's stories. "I'm sorry, I can't do more than just listen, sister-in-law." "Don't worry about it. Thanks to you, I can somehow keep my spirits up. Thank you always." She said that, so I continued to listen to my sister-in-law's stories, thinking that if I could be of help in any way, it was worth it. In the midst of all this, an incident occurred. While my brother-in-law was absent due to work, my sister-in-law was asked by mother-in-law to go shopping. She intended to take her daughter with her, but my mother-in-law told her that she was being watched and asked her to go along quickly. Reluctantly, she went shopping alone. When she returned, she was greeted with the sight of her daughter that had drastically changed from before. The long, beautifully grown hair had been haphazardly cut. "Hey, what happened to your hair?" "Grandma did it." She rushed over to her daughter in a panic. "Hey, why would you do something like this?" She confronted her mother-in-law, who was in the kitchen, about why she had done such a thoughtless thing. Girls become more active as they grow up, so long hair just gets in the way. Apparently, she didn't apologize at all. Daughter was crying the whole time, and my sister-in-law couldn't help but crying as well, seeing her like that. Just then, my brother-in-law came home, and a fierce fight broke out between him and my mother-in-law. During the argument, my mother-in-law contacted my husband, and he intervened to calm things down. It seemed like they managed to resolve the situation on the spot, but ever since then, my worried husband has been regularly visiting my in-laws. My brother-in-law firmly told my mother-in-law, "Don't interfere with us ever again. If you do something like this again, we'll leave it." It seems like my mother-in-law got upset about it once again. My husband is concerned and continues to support my mother-in-law by visiting my in-law's place, but solving this issue won't be accomplished just by pacifying her. Even from my perspective as a third party, I feel like my mother-in-law is 100% at fault. Perhaps She thinks she's doing things for the best, but sometimes what she does can be a bothersome imposition on others. Unless my mother-in-law truly understands that, this matter will never be resolved. You have to explain it to your mother properly and make her understand. Just pacifying her won't prevent the same thing from happening again. My brother's wife should just rely on my mother openly. After all, my mother has done so much for us. No, isn't it going too far to cut your sister-in-law's daughter's hair without permission? Well, hair goes back quickly, right? My husband seems to side with my mother-in-law fundamentally, saying such hopeless things. When I try to suggest that my mother-in-law bears some responsibility, my mother is someone who acts for the sake of others. And later, I end up getting scolded. People who act for the sake of others wouldn't go and cut someone's hair without permission. That's what I think, but I decided to stay silent, thinking it would only complicate things further if I said more. However, no matter how much my husband visits my in-laws, it won't solve anything with the way things are. But with my busy work schedule, I can't go directly to my in-laws' place like my husband does. Still, I grew worried and contacted my sister-in-law, asking her if everything has been okay lately. As expected, the stress for my sister-in-law and her husband has been increasing, and she burst into tears over the phone. Having Anthony come and keep my mother-in-law company is appreciated, but I think this issue won't be resolved until my mother-in-law herself changes. Yes, I think so too. In times like these, why can't my husband think beyond the immediate situation? Why can't he empathize with my brother-in-law and his wife's feeling? It left me feeling helpless and frustrated. Just as I was thinking about how I could help my brother-in-law and his wife, something unbelievable happened when I came home from work. "Oh, welcome home, Aita." It was my mother-in-law who greeted me like that. "Huh? Mother-in-law? Why are you here in my place?" "I brought her here. She seemed uncomfortable at her house." My husband peeked out from the living room and was smiling and laughing with my mother-in-law. No, this can't be a joke. He just brought my mother-in-law here without any discussion whatsoever. Thinking that, I asked my husband why my mother-in-law was in the bathroom. "Hey, what's the meaning of this? I didn't hear anything about this." If my mother stays at her own house, her stress will only build up, right? So I thought we should change the atmosphere. According to my husband, he came up with this idea as a way to improve the situation for my mother-in-law. But even so, I live here too. It should be natural to have a conversation about it. I grew increasingly frustrated with my husband's selfish action. The apartment we live in is meant for families, and there happened to be an empty room which we had turned into a storage room for our child's sake. My husband just unilaterally decided to make it my mother-in-law's room. Irritated, I tried to ask him in a somewhat normal tone. "How long do you plan on having your mother stay at our place?" Until she settles down, I guess." "Until she settles down? For this matter, your mother needs to understand." Just then, my mother-in-law returned from the bathroom, and we had to interrupt the conversation. I wanted to discuss with my husband what he should do from now on. From my perspective, It's clear that it's important to create physical distance between my mother-in-law and my brother-in-law's family. However, I also live in this apartment. It would be difficult for me if my mother-in-law stayed with us indefinitely. But since my husband brought her here, I can't just kick her out. Feeling that things couldn't continue like this, I decided to talk to my husband without my mother-in-law the next day during my lunch break at work. I sent him a message specifying a time and place. I want to talk today without your mother. Let's meet and talk outside after work. After finishing work, I headed to the agreed-upon place, but my husband never showed up. There was no reply to my message either. I tried calling him, but he didn't answer. Worried that something might have happened, I decided to go back home. To my surprise, my husband was already at home. I couldn't make sense of it, even though I'm usually composed. Hey, I sent you a message saying I wanted to talk, didn't I? Why did you come home first? And you didn't reply either. Huh? There's nothing to talk about. Besides, my mother is alone at home. She would feel lonely if I didn't come back soon, right? Even I was at a loss for words in response to this. It wasn't a joke. I was completely bewildered by my husband's attitude. I was shocked to realize that he was someone with whom communication was so difficult. My brother-in-law and his wife had been closer to my mother-in-law and had more interaction with her. That's why I had relied on them so much. Since I only visited my in-laws occasionally, I had no idea that my husband was so overprotective of his mother. In the midst of contemplating what to do next, one day I couldn't focus on work and decided to take the afternoon off and go home early. My mother-in-law had mentioned that she would be out with her friends, so there was nobody at home, and I finally had the chance to relax alone after a long time. However, just as I was enjoying my solitude, the intercom rang. I wondered what it could be. Did I order something? With that thought in mind, I opened the door to find several large packages delivered. Anthony is not someone who shops online, and I hadn't ordered anything recently either. It seemed strange, so I checked the shipping labels, and all of the packages were addressed to my mother-in-law with Anthony listed as the sender. It was clear to me that Anthony was fully intent on having my mother-in-law live with us. I instantly realized it. In the evening, Anthony contacted me saying, I made a plan with my mother to have dinner and meet up. Everything suddenly felt absurd, and I could feel my feelings toward my husband cooling off. I had previously wanted to find a solution for my mother-in-law's situation, but all of those feelings had completely vanished. That day, I went to bed without waiting for my husband to come home. The next day, my husband had a day off from work, and he woke up while I was having breakfast. Then he casually said something to me. I think my mother's packages might arrive today, so if they come, please accept them. We are going shopping together with my mother today. Oh, they arrived yesterday, so I sent them back. Upon hearing that, my husband suddenly became furious. Huh? You sent them back? Why would you do that without asking me? You didn't consult me about anything, and I don't want her living here indefinitely. What did you say? My mother is in trouble. You are so heartless. If you are going to say that, then you should leave. Even though he said such things, I was no longer shocked. I left the house as he told me to and headed to my parents' home. During that time, my husband contacted me several times, but the content of his messages was all about apologizing to me and his mother. I couldn't sense even a hint of sincerity in his apologies. It felt ridiculous, so I immediately blocked his call. Then I gathered the necessary documents and returned to the apartment 2 days later. When I pressed the intercom, my husband came out. "Did you finally decide to apologize?" Looking down on me, he sneered. I calmly responded to him, disregarding his attitude. "I'm coming back to this apartment." Upon hearing my words, he must have thought that I had decided to apologize. For a moment, my husband had a smug expression on his face, and I didn't overlook it. To my astonished husband, I handed over several documents. "Do you remember? This apartment originally belonged to my parents." My husband widened his eyes and clearly showed his agitation. Without paying any attention to him, I continued. "Also sign the divorce papers. Oh, if you refuse, I'll ask a lawyer. Don't think you can avoid a divorce by resisting. That's just wishful thinking." What's going on all of a sudden? You come back and then tell me to leave? Divorced? Don't make a decision on your own. Don't make a decision on my own? Well, let me tell you. What about you? You brought your mother here without consulting me and tried to let her live here without any discussion. Because you kept doing selfish things without my consent, I made a decision on my own. My husband's face turned pale quickly, and perhaps he finally realized the seriousness of the situation. He immediately tried to change his attitude toward me, offering multiple insincere apologies and making various excuses, but none of it affected me anymore. Of course, my decision to divorce him remained unchanged. Seeing my husband panic and scramble, I couldn't help but think, serves you right. Maybe I had already lost my feelings for him a long time ago. While pondering such thoughts, I gave him one final warning. "Oh, and stop bothering your brothers too, okay? If that happens again, I gladly take their side and make sure you both end up in hell." Upon hearing that, my husband slumped down in exhaustion, and the next day, he left with his mother. They returned to their parents' house, but of course his brothers and his wife were no longer there. They had moved out as soon as my mother-in-law arrived. Now, it's just the three of us living peacefully as a family. I live alone in the apartment now, and my days are fulfilling with both work and personal life. I still maintain a relationship with my brothers-in-law and regularly have meals together. However, I have completely severed ties with my mother-in-law and ex-husband, expressing that I never want to be involved with them again. As for myself, I strive to live a peaceful and happy life, being cautious to avoid similar situations in the future.